A street kid found a dying girl in an alley clutching a pendant with a number engraved inside. He called it without thinking. What he didn't know, the voice on the other end belonged to a vampire king. And the girl he saved was his only daughter. The city never slept, but it had quiet hours. 3 a.m. was one of them. Kelvin pulled his torn hoodie tighter against the autumn chill, his sneakers silent on the cracked pavement as he made his way through the industrial district. His backpack clinked softly, 12 empty bottles he'd found tonight. Maybe enough for breakfast if he hit the recycling center early. The alley behind the old textile factory was his usual shortcut. He knew every dumpster, every fire escape, every shadow where he could hide if the wrong people showed up. 2 years on the streets had taught him to be invisible, to take what he needed and ask no questions. He was halfway through when he saw her. A girl, maybe 8 years old, collapsed against the brick wall like a broken porcelain doll. Her platinum blonde hair spilled across the dirty pavement, catching the distant streetlight like spun silver. Kelvin froze. Every instinct screamed at him to keep walking. Street rule number 1. Mind your own business. People who got involved in other people's problems ended up hurt. Or worse. But she was just a kid. Smaller than him. Hey! His voice came out rougher than he intended, echoing off the alley walls. No response. He approached slowly, scanning the shadows for anyone watching. Drug deals gone wrong. Gang initiation. Human trafficking. He'd seen it all in these alleys. But the girl was alone. As he got closer, his breath caught. Her clothes were wrong. A crimson dress that looked like it belonged in a museum, velvet and silk with intricate black embroidery that seemed to move in the dim light. Antique lace at the collar and cuffs. The fabric looked expensive, the kind of expensive that didn't end up in this part of the city unless something had gone very, very wrong. Kelvin dropped to his knees beside her, his backpack forgotten. Can you hear me? He pressed 2 fingers against her neck the way he'd seen in movies, searching for a pulse. Nothing. He tried her wrist. Still nothing. But her skin was cold, not corpse cold, but refrigerator cold. Like she'd been lying in a freezer. And she was pale. Not sick pale or scared pale, but translucent pale, like he could see the blue veins beneath her skin in the darkness. Come on, he muttered, tilting her head back to check her breathing. That's when he noticed her hand. Small fingers were wrapped around something at her throat. He gently uncurled them. A pendant. A massive blood-red ruby surrounded by black thorns worked in what looked like real gold. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, medieval, like something a princess would wear in a fairy tale. He turned it over, and his heart stopped. Numbers were engraved on the back in elegant silver script. A phone number. Kelvin stared at the unconscious girl, then at the pendant, then back at the girl. This was wrong. Wrong dress, wrong jewelry, wrong everything. He should run. Should get as far away from this as possible before whoever owned that pendant came looking. But she wasn't breathing. Or at least, he couldn't tell if she was. His phone, a battered flip phone he'd bought for $10 at a pawn shop, was already in his hand. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed. 1 ring. 2 rings. Who dares use this line? The voice that answered wasn't a greeting. It was a command. Deep, resonant, with an accent that sounded ancient, European, maybe. The kind of voice that made you stand up straighter even through a phone. It made the hair on the back of Kelvin's neck stand up. Kelvin's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, trying to sound older, more confident. I found a girl. She's unconscious in an alley on Warehouse Row near the old textile factory. She's not breathing, I think. She's really cold. And she's wearing this pendant with your number on it. Describe her. The voice cut through his words like a blade, sharp and absolute. Maybe 8 years old, really pale, blonde hair, wearing this fancy red dress. Like, really fancy. Museum fancy. What color are her eyes? I don't know. They're closed. She's unconscious. Open them. The command in that voice left no room for argument. It wasn't a request. It was an order from someone who'd never been disobeyed in his life. Kelvin's hands shook as he gently lifted one of the girl's eyelids. He gasped. Her iris was crystalline blue, but within it, tiny flecks of crimson seemed to pulse like embers in dying coals. Like blood moving through ice. Blue, he whispered. But with red things. Moving red things. The silence on the other end stretched so long Kelvin thought the call had dropped. Your name. It wasn't a question. Kelvin. Look, this kid needs a hospital. Stay exactly where you are. Do not let anyone approach her. Do not touch the pendant again. Do not call anyone else. We are coming. Wait, who? The line went dead. Kelvin stared at his phone, his mind racing. We. Who is we? Should he call 911 anyway? But something in that voice had been absolutely certain, desperate even, though it was wrapped in steel and authority. He looked down at the girl. She seemed even paler now, if that was possible. Her lips had a faint blue tinge. On impulse, he shrugged off his hoodie and laid it over her small frame, then sat back against the wall beside her, keeping watch. His fingers found the knife in his pocket, a small folding blade he'd found in a dumpster. Not much, but it was something. For minutes passed. Maybe 5. Then he heard them. No sirens. No screeching tires. Just the whisper-quiet purr of expensive engines. 3 black cars glided into the alley sleek, predatory things with tinted windows that reflected nothing. They shouldn't have fit. The alley was barely wide enough for a delivery truck, but they moved with impossible precision, stopping in perfect formation just feet from where he crouched. The doors opened in perfect synchronization. The figures that emerged wore long black coats that gleamed like oil in the dim light. 7 of them, moving with a fluid grace that made Kelvin's survival instincts scream. Predator. They wore no uniforms, but something about the way they moved, coordinated, efficient, dangerous, screamed military. Or something worse. The tallest one approached first. Even hunched in his coat, he had to be over 6.5 feet. In the shadows of his hood, Kelvin caught glimpses of sharp features and eyes that reflected the streetlight wrong. Too bright. Too red. You called King Alaric, the man said, his voice respectful but wary as he knelt beside the girl. His hands moved over her with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, examining the pendant, assessing the scene. Step back, boy. Is she going to be okay? Kelvin didn't move. What's wrong with her? The man's head snapped toward him, and for just a second, Kelvin saw his eyes clearly in the light from the cars. They were crimson. Actual glowing crimson, like backlit rubies. You found Princess Maya alive. That is all that matters. He gestured, and 2 others moved forward with what looked like a medical stretcher, all padding and restraints and equipment Kelvin didn't recognize. But you have contacted the king directly. He will want to speak with you. Princess. The word came out as a squeak. Kelvin hated how young he sounded. Princess of what? The man stood, and Kelvin suddenly realized just how tall he was. How wrong he was. Too graceful. Too perfect. Too still, like he didn't need to breathe. That is not my question to answer. His crimson eyes studied Kelvin with an intensity that made him want to run. You touch the royal pendant and live, the figure said, tilting his head. Interesting. Kelvin's mouth went dry. He didn't understand what that meant, but he understood the weight of those words, the way everyone went still. Kelvin. The man, King Alaric, the others had called him, studied him with unnerving intensity. You have done House Dracula a great service tonight. That debt will be repaid. They lifted Maya with reverent care, her small body cradled like glass. As they moved toward the cars, King Alaric paused. You will come with us. It wasn't a question. Kelvin's life on the streets had just ended. He wasn't sure if what came next would be better or infinitely worse. The car smelled like leather and something else, something metallic and sweet that made Kelvin's stomach turn. He sat pressed against the door, as far from the pale figures as possible, while Maya lay across the back seat between them, still unconscious. They'd tried to separate them at the alley. Kelvin had said no. He didn't know why. Didn't know what insanity made him refuse when creatures with glowing red eyes told him to step back. But when they'd moved to take Maya without him, something in his chest had twisted hard, and the word had burst out before he could stop it. No. King Alaric had stared at him for a long moment, then smiled, a terrible expression that showed too many teeth. Bring him. Now they were descending. The cars had driven into the basement of the oldest church in the city, a Gothic monstrosity that had been condemned for years. But instead of stopping, they'd kept going down a ramp that shouldn't exist, through passages carved from living rock, spiraling deeper and deeper until Kelvin's ears popped and the air grew cold as a tomb. The passage opened into a cavern that stole his breath. A palace of black marble stretched before him, impossibly vast, impossibly beautiful. Crimson light emanated from veins in the stone itself, pulsing like a heartbeat. Columns soared toward a ceiling lost in shadow, carved with scenes of battles and feasts and things Kelvin didn't have names for. Chandeliers dripped with what looked like frozen blood, casting everything in shades of red and darkness. And there were hundreds of them. Vampires, the word crashed into his mind with absolute certainty, lined the halls, emerged from doorways, watched from balconies above. All beautiful. All deadly. All staring at him with eyes that gleamed like predators spotting wounded prey. A human, someone hissed. In the obsidian palace, another whispered, the words dripping with shock and hunger. The king has lost his mind. Kelvin wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him to bolt back up those passages, but hands gripped his shoulders, gentle but unmovable, guiding him forward. They carried Maya ahead of him through halls that seemed to stretch forever, finally entering a throne room that made the rest look plain. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of black stone veined with red, and the man who rose from it made every vampire Kelvin had seen look ordinary. King Alaric Valtori wore a perfectly tailored black suit with crimson accents that probably cost more than Kelvin would see in 10 lifetimes. His snow-white hair fell past his shoulders, contrasting sharply with skin pale as moonlight. But it was his eyes, crimson as fresh blood, ancient as mountains, that made Kelvin's knees weak. Power radiated from him like heat from a furnace, making the air itself feel heavy. Lay my daughter here, Alaric commanded, gesturing to a chaise lounge of black velvet. They placed Maya down with infinite care. A woman in flowing robes, some kind of healer, Kelvin guessed, immediately began examining her, hands glowing with soft crimson light. She will recover, my king, the healer said after a moment. But she was drained nearly to death. Another hour and... Who? Alaric's voice could have cut steel. Unknown. The wounds were inflicted by vampire fangs, but I sensed no familiar signature. A growl rippled through the assembled vampires, low and dangerous. And you, Alaric turned those terrible eyes on Kelvin. You found her. In an alley. Yes, sir. How very convenient. The words hung like a noose. Kelvin's heart hammered against his ribs. I didn't hurt her. I just found her and called the number and... Papa. The word froze everyone. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open, the same crimson as her father's, but somehow softer, younger. She looked around the throne room with confusion, then fear, then her gaze landed on Kelvin and something in her expression eased. Safe, she whispered, reaching toward him. Kelvin moved before anyone could stop him, crossing to kneel beside the chaise. Maya's small hand grabbed his, gripping tight. You're safe, she repeated, tears sliding down her pale cheeks. You smell safe. Princess, Alaric's voice had changed, gone softer with concern. Come to Papa. Let the human. No. Maya's grip tightened, her other hand clutching Kelvin's arm. He found me. He kept me warm. He called you. He's safe, Papa. Everything else is scary. The king stared at his daughter, then at Kelvin, with an expression Kelvin couldn't read. Shock, maybe. Or suspicion. My daughter does not trust easily, Alaric said slowly. She has been taught to fear humans, to see them as prey or enemies. Yet she clings to a street child as if he were her salvation. He moved closer, and Kelvin fought every urge to flinch away. You are either a witness to an attack on royal blood, Alaric continued, his voice dropping to something deadly, or you are somehow complicit in it. Until I determine which, you will remain here. Under guard. If you harmed her, boy, death will be a mercy I do not grant. Guards materialized from the shadows, their hands settling on Kelvin's shoulders. Wait, I didn't. But Maya was already being pulled away by healers, her small voice crying safe, safe, safe as she reached back toward him, and Kelvin was being dragged in the opposite direction, into a palace of monsters, with no idea if he'd ever see daylight again. They released him at dawn, though released was generous. The guards had hauled him back through those endless tunnels, up into the church basement, and shoved him toward the street as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky pink and gold. "Stay where we can find you," the taller one said, his crimson eyes already fading to something almost human in the growing light. "The king isn't finished with you." Then they were gone, dissolving into the shadows of the church like they'd never existed. Kelvin stood on the cracked sidewalk, exhausted and shaking, his mind still struggling to accept what he'd seen. Vampires. An underground palace. A princess who'd clung to him like he was the only solid thing in the world. He touched his arm where Maya had gripped him, half expecting to find it had all been some fever dream. But his hoodie still smelled like that sweet metallic scent from the car, and when he looked down, he could see a smudge of something dark on his sleeve. Blood, maybe. He didn't want to think about it. The walk back to his hideout took 40 minutes. He'd been squatting in an abandoned apartment building on the east side for 3 months now. The landlord had died, the city was still fighting over the property, and nobody checked the upper floors. Kelvin had claimed a corner unit on the 4th floor, the one with a window that still had most of its glass and a door that locked from the inside. But as he approached, everything felt wrong. The morning was too quiet. The usual sounds, Mrs. Chen opening her convenience store, the bus hissing to a stop, teenagers shouting on their way to school, all seemed muted, distant. And there was a woman across the street. She stood in the shadow of a boarded-up laundromat, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to drink the light. Not a vampire, Kelvin had learned to recognize that predatory grace, that unnatural stillness. This woman moved like a human, but a dangerous one. Like the soldiers he'd seen sometimes in the downtown square. Her eyes locked onto his, and even from across the street, Kelvin felt the weight of her gaze. Then she turned and walked away, her hand lifting in what might have been a wave or a warning. Kelvin's skin crawled. He hurried inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. When he reached his floor, he froze. A crimson vial sat on his doorstep, no bigger than his thumb, filled with liquid that seemed to glow in the dim hallway. A note was wrapped around it, held in place with a rubber band. His hands shook as he unfolded the paper. "Your mother died for this. They're coming for you next." The handwriting punched him in the gut. He'd seen it before, on the 3 letters his mother had left him before she died 4 years ago. Letters he'd read so many times the creases had nearly torn through. This was her handwriting, he'd know it anywhere. But that was impossible. She was dead. He'd watched them lower her into the ground. Kelvin grabbed the vial and note, fumbling with his key, desperate to get inside, to think, to figure out what was happening. The door swung open, and vampires materialized in his room. He yelped, stumbling backward, but they moved faster, blocking the hallway. 3 of them, including one of the guards from last night. "The boy reeks of hunter magic," one said, his nose wrinkling. "They've marked him," another confirmed. "The Crimson Serum." "How did they know to find him here?" "It doesn't matter," the guard from last night growled. "Get him out. Now." "Wait, what marked?" "I didn't do anything, I just found." Glass shattered. The window in his room exploded inward, and figures in black tactical gear poured through like smoke. Crossbows. Silver knives. Weapons that gleamed with something that made the vampires hiss and recoil. Hunters. Everything became chaos. The vampires moved with impossible speed, engaging the hunters in a fight that demolished what little furniture Kelvin owned. A crossbow bolt whistled past his ear and buried itself in the wall, the tip glowing with strange symbols. One hunter lunged for Kelvin, shouting something about the marked one, but a vampire intercepted, and they crashed through the doorframe in a tangle of limbs and violence. "Go," the guard yelled at Kelvin, shoving him toward the stairs. "Down. Now." Kelvin ran. Behind him, the sounds of fighting intensified, screams, crashes, the wet sound of blades finding flesh. He took the stairs 3 at a time, terror giving him speed he didn't know he had. More hunters appeared on the second-floor landing. He changed direction, bursting through a door into someone's old apartment, racing through rooms that still had faded wallpaper and broken furniture, finding a fire escape on the far side. He was halfway down the rusted ladder when a vampire appeared below him, moved so fast Kelvin didn't see him arrive, just suddenly there, looking up with those crimson eyes. Jump. What? Jump, boy. I'll catch you. Kelvin jumped. Strong arms caught him, and then the world blurred. They were moving impossibly fast, the city streaking past in a rush of color and sound. More vampires joined them, forming a protective circle as they ran. Kelvin caught glimpses of pursuit, hunters on motorcycles, a black van, figures on rooftops, but the vampires were faster. They ran until the city fell away and mountains rose ahead, until a castle emerged from the mist like something out of a storybook, all dark towers and ancient stone. Welcome, the guard said as they stopped at massive iron gates, to Castle Dracula. The princess has been asking for you. The gates swung open, and Kelvin realized his life on the streets hadn't just ended in that alley. It had ended the moment he decided not to walk away. Castle Dracula rose from the mountainside like a crown of thorns, all impossible spires and Gothic arches that seemed to defy gravity itself. Perpetual twilight clung to it, not quite day, not quite night, as if the castle existed in its own pocket of time. Gargoyles perched on every corner, their stone eyes following Kelvin as the guards hurried him through courtyards and across bridges that spanned dizzying drops into mist-filled canyons. He'd thought the Obsidian Palace was impressive. This place made that look like a waiting room. They didn't give him time to clean up or rest. The guards marched him straight through massive doors of black, wood reinforced with silver, down a corridor lined with portraits of pale figures in ancient clothing, their painted eyes tracking his movement. Whispers followed him, servants and nobles alike stopping to stare at the filthy human child being escorted through their sanctum. The council chamber doors opened with a groan that sounded almost alive. The room beyond was circular, ringed with high-backed chairs of carved stone. Vampires occupied most of them, dozens of pale, beautiful, deadly faces turned toward him as he was led to the center. A symbol was inlaid in the black marble floor beneath his feet, a rose wrapped in thorns, done in crimson and silver. He stood in the heart of it, feeling like a sacrifice on an altar. King Alaric sat in the largest chair, elevated slightly above the others. Maya was beside him, looking tiny in her own throne, still wearing a nightgown and wrapped in a blanket of black silk. When she saw Kelvin, her face lit up, and she started to rise, but her father's hand on her shoulder kept her seated. "The court is assembled," Alaric announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "We are here to determine the fate of the human child who bears the name Kelvin." A woman rose from one of the chairs, elegant in a way that made Kelvin think of ice sculptures and knife edges. Her hair was black as midnight, swept up in an elaborate style that probably took hours. Her gown was silver, and her eyes were like frozen lakes, beautiful and utterly devoid of warmth. "Councilwoman Seraphine," Alaric acknowledged. "Your Majesty." She inclined her head just enough to be respectful, not enough to be deferential. "I will speak plainly. This situation reeks of manipulation." Her gaze locked onto Kelvin, and he fought the urge to step back. "A human boy, living on the streets, just happens to find our princess in an alley," Seraphine continued, her voice silk wrapped around steel. "He just happens to have the courage or foolishness to touch a royal pendant that should have burned him to ash. He just happens to call the emergency line, which only 3 humans in the entire city even know exists. And Princess Maya, who has trusted no one outside her immediate family since the incident 3 years ago, just happens to bond with him instantly." She turned to address the full council. "Too many coincidences. This boy is either a spy planted by the hunters, or he's something far worse, a weapon they don't even know they've created." Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Kelvin's mouth went dry. I didn't do anything, he said, his voice smaller than he wanted. I just found her and… Silence, Seraphine snapped. Humans speak when given permission. He has my permission. Alaric's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Continue, boy. Kelvin swallowed hard. I just found her. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know about any of this. I couldn't leave her there. How touching, Seraphine said, her tone making it clear it was anything but. And yet the hunters knew exactly where to find you this morning. Hunters who left you a vial of crimson serum, a substance that takes weeks to craft and is worth more than this castle. Why waste it on a street urchin unless you're valuable to their plans? I don't know. I don't know anything about hunters or serum or… Papa, stop. Maya's voice rang out, high and desperate. She'd left her throne and was standing now, her small hands clenched into fists. He's scared. He doesn't understand. I can feel it. You can feel it? Another council member leaned forward, an older vampire with steel-gray hair. Princess, explain. Maya looked at her father, who nodded permission. This morning, she said quietly, I woke up and felt him. The safe one. He was scared, so scared, and there were bad people trying to hurt him. I told Papa we had to help him, and Papa sent the guards and… She looked at Kelvin with those ancient crimson eyes in her child's face. He didn't know we were coming. He was just running. He's not a spy. He's just scared and alone. The council erupted in whispers. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. The princess sensed him from here? Someone asked. That's nearly 20 miles. She's never demonstrated such range before, another added. Which proves my point, Seraphine declared. There is something unnatural about this connection. The boy is a weapon, whether he knows it or not. Or, Alaric said, rising from his throne, and the entire chamber fell silent, he is something else entirely. Something we do not yet understand. He descended from the dais, each step measured and deliberate, until he stood before Kelvin. Up close, his power was suffocating. Who is your mother, boy? Sarah. Sarah Chin. And your father? Never knew him. Mom said he left before I was born. Did your mother have unusual abilities? Speak of strange things? Keep secrets. Kelvin thought of the letters, the handwriting on today's note. She said weird things sometimes. About staying hidden. About being careful who I trusted. I thought she was just paranoid. She was protecting you, Alaric said softly. Then, louder, addressing the council, I declare that Kelvin will remain under royal protection as a companion to Princess Maya. He will reside in the castle, under guard, until we determine the truth of his nature and his mother's legacy. The chamber exploded. A human in the castle is forbidden. It violates every law. Your Majesty, this is madness. But Alaric's eyes flashed crimson, and his power rolled out like a wave, pressing everyone back into their chairs. I am your king, he said, his voice deadly quiet. And I have spoken. Court is dismissed. The tower room was absurd. That was Kelvin's first thought as servants. Actual servants in black and silver uniforms ushered him inside and closed the door behind him. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in dark velvet that probably cost more than everything Kelvin had owned in his entire life combined. Real wood furniture. A fireplace with actual logs burning. Windows that looked out over mountains painted silver by moonlight. He stood in the center of the room, still in his dirty street clothes, afraid to touch anything. For 2 years, he'd slept on cardboard and considered himself lucky when he found a corner that blocked the wind. Now he had a bed that could fit 4 people and pillows that looked like clouds. He wanted to cry. Or laugh. Maybe both. Instead, he kicked off his worn sneakers and approached the bed like it might bite him. The mattress gave slightly under his weight, soft but supportive, nothing like the lumpy disaster in his old apartment. Clean sheets. An actual blanket. He lay back and stared at the canopy above him, carved with roses and thorns, and wondered if he'd wake up back in the alley. This whole insane experience nothing but a fever dream. You're not asleep yet. Kelvin bolted upright so fast his vision spun. Maya stood beside the bed, her small figure wrapped in a robe of deep crimson, her platinum hair braided for sleep. She smiled at his reaction. How did you? The door's locked and there are guards. Secret passages, she said matter-of-factly, like every castle had them. This used to be my aunt's room, 300 years ago. She liked to sneak out too. She climbed onto the bed without asking, settling cross-legged on top of the covers. Up close, Kelvin could see she looked better than she had in the alley, color in her cheeks, strength in her movements, but her eyes held a weight no 8-year-old should carry. I need to tell you something, Maya said. Something I didn't say in court because Papa gets scary when he's really angry, and this would make him really angry. Kelvin's stomach tightened. Maya, if this is going to get you in trouble. I was lured out. The words came fast, like she'd been holding them in too long. 3 nights ago, I found a note in my room. I don't know how it got past the wards. It said there was information about the boy from the prophecy waiting for me at the old cathedral downtown. What prophecy? I don't know, but I've heard Papa and the council whisper about it sometimes. Something about a child who bridges 2 worlds. I thought. I wanted to know. Her voice got smaller. I snuck out. I went to the cathedral. And someone was waiting. She pulled her knees up to her chest, suddenly looking exactly like the frightened child she was. They gave me tea. Said it would help me see visions of the prophecy. But it was crimson serum, mixed with something else. Something that made me so sick so fast. I tried to run, but I only made it a few blocks before everything went dark. Kelvin remembered finding her, how cold she'd been, how close to death. Who did this? I don't know. It was dark and they wore masks. But before I passed out completely, I saw her. Maya's eyes locked onto his. A woman. Human. She was crying. She knelt beside me and pressed the pendant into my hand, the one around my neck. She said. Maya's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He'll save you. He has to know. Tell him about the archives. The room felt suddenly colder. Tell who? You, I think. She said him like she knew someone specific. And the pendant led you to me, didn't it? You called the number inside. Kelvin's mind raced. The woman from this morning, the one who'd left the vial. The handwriting that matched his mother's. The pieces weren't fitting together. They were colliding, creating more questions than answers. What archives? Maya slid off the bed and held out her hand. I'll show you. But we have to be quiet. The forbidden archives are, well, forbidden. If Papa finds out, he'll get really angry? He might exile us both. Kelvin took her hand. Then let's not get caught. The secret passage opened behind a tapestry of a blood-red moon, revealing stairs that spiraled down into darkness. Maya produced a small crystal from her robe that glowed with soft crimson light. Vampire magic, Kelvin realized, still trying to wrap his head around the fact that magic was real. They descended for what felt like hours, passing through walls Kelvin would have sworn were solid, navigating turns that seemed designed to confuse intruders. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber lined floor to ceiling with books, scrolls, and artifacts that hummed with ancient power. The forbidden archives, Maya whispered. Everything the council wants to forget is kept here. She led him past shelves of crumbling texts to a section marked with a symbol, a black rose surrounded by silver thorns. House Blackwood, she read. Papa said they were traitors. That they were destroyed 200 years ago for conspiring with hunters. But there, on a shelf at Kelvin's eye level, was a journal. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but the name embossed on the front made his breath catch. Isabella Blackwood. He pulled it down with shaking hands and opened to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, but as he read the first line, his blood turned to ice. My name is Isabella Blackwood, and I have committed the unforgivable sin. I have fallen in love with a human hunter. Maya leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Kelvin, I think we just found out why you're special. He turned the page, and his mother's face stared back at him from a pressed photograph, young and smiling, standing next to a man with kind eyes and a hunter's marks tattooed on his wrists. Beneath it, in that same elegant handwriting, our daughter, Sarah, will be the bridge between our worlds. Sarah. His mother's name. Kelvin's hands shook so badly the journal nearly fell. Maya caught it, her small fingers steadying his. Your grandmother, she breathed. Your grandmother was a vampire. Kelvin couldn't breathe. The photograph swam in his vision as Maya held the journal steady, her crimson eyes wide with shock that mirrored his own. His mother, young, maybe 19, smiled up at the camera with a happiness he'd never seen on her face in his memories. And beside her, his arm around her waist, looking at her like she was his entire world, was King Alaric Val Tori. Younger, less haunted, but unmistakably the same man. Keep reading, Maya whispered. His hands shook as he turned the pages. Isabella's handwriting filled them, neat at first, growing more frantic as the entries progressed. March 15th, Alaric doesn't know I'm a hunter. I should tell him. I will tell him. But every time I try, I see how he looks at me, and I'm terrified it will change. The house would kill me for this betrayal. His court would kill me for the deception. But when he touches me, none of it matters. June 3rd, I'm pregnant. Alaric is overjoyed. He wants to announce it to the entire court, declare our child the heir of House Val Tori. I made him wait. I need to tell him the truth first. I need to make him understand. July 20th, I told him everything. He was angry, so angry the windows shattered with his power. But then he held me and said he didn't care. That love was stronger than blood feuds and ancient grudges. That we would find a way. August 8th, we were fools. The house discovered my betrayal. Master Victor himself came to the castle, demanded I return to face judgment. Alaric refused. The court divided, some supported their king, others saw me as a contamination. Councilwoman Seraphine called our unborn child an abomination. Kelvin's stomach twisted. He'd heard that word today, felt the weight of it in the council chamber. September 1st, they're coming. Not just the house, the Vampire Council has declared our union illegal, our child a threat to the natural order. They'll kill us both to prevent a hybrid heir from existing. Alaric wants to fight, but I can't let him destroy his kingdom for me. September 3rd, I'm leaving tonight. Alaric doesn't know. I've packed what I can carry and forged documents for a new identity. Saracen. Simple. Forgettable. Human. I'm taking our son far away, where neither hunters nor vampires will find us. I've left Alaric a letter, though I doubt it will ease his pain. I love him. God help me, I love him more than my own life. But I love our child more. If you're reading this, my darling Kelvin, it means I failed to keep you safe. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you need to know, you are loved. You are not an abomination. You are a miracle, the son of a hunter and a vampire king, the bridge between two worlds. The lullaby I sing you every night, it's more than a song. It's the crimson serum formula encoded in melody. Your father's alchemists created it centuries ago to heal hybrid children. I stole the only sample and destroyed their notes. If they ever find you, if you ever need proof of what you are, sing the song. Your blood will recognize it. Kelvin's throat closed. He could hear it now, his mother's voice in their tiny apartment, rocking him to sleep even when he was too old for lullabies. Roses red and thorns of black, silver moon and crimson track. He'd thought it was just nonsense. A pretty song she'd made up. Kelvin, Maya breathed. That song, I've heard you humming it. When you were nervous in the council chamber. The final entry was dated just 3 days before his mother died. They've found us. I don't know how. I've hidden the serum and the journals where only Kelvin can find them. If I don't survive, someone must tell Alaric the truth. Our son lives. Our son is extraordinary. And he needs his father. No. The voice came from the doorway, raw with devastation. No, this can't. Alaric stood in the archive entrance, his perfect composure shattered. His crimson eyes were wide with shock, his pale face somehow even paler. In his hand, he held an identical journal, its pages yellowed with age. I searched for years, he said, his voice breaking on the words. I tore the world apart looking for you both. They told me there was a fire, that you were trapped inside, that they'd found. He stopped, his throat working. They found remains. A woman and child. I buried them. I mourned you. He moved forward like a man in a dream, crossing the archives until he stood before Kelvin. Up close, the resemblance was obvious. The same sharp cheekbones, the same stubborn set to the jaw. How had Kelvin not seen it before? Isabella told me our son would have her eyes, Alaric whispered. Green as spring leaves. Eyes that could see good in everyone. Kelvin's eyes were green. The only feature he'd inherited from his mother that wasn't common. You're my father. The words felt surreal, impossible. You're and I'm your sister. Maya launched herself at Kelvin, wrapping her arms around his waist. Really your sister. That's why I could feel you. That's why you felt safe. Alaric knelt, bringing himself to Kelvin's level. His hand reached out, hesitant, and touched Kelvin's cheek with infinite gentleness. You survived, he breathed. You survived, and you're extraordinary. A damper, half vampire, half human. It's why the pendant didn't harm you. It recognized royal blood, but your humanity protected you from the vampire wards. It's why Maya bonded with you instantly. She sensed family. Tears tracked down Alaric's face, and Kelvin realized he was crying too. I thought I'd lost everything, Alaric said. But Isabella saved you. She kept you safe all these years. And now you're home. I don't understand, Kelvin said, his voice cracking. Why would they fake our deaths? Who would? The same people who attacked Maya, Alaric said, his grief hardening into fury. The same people who left you that serum. Someone wants the hybrid heir found, but not by me. He stood, pulling both children into his arms. But they made one critical mistake, he said softly. They led my son back to me. And now that I have you both, I will burn down anyone who tries to take you away. Kelvin woke to silk sheets and morning light filtering through stained glass, and for 3 blissful seconds, he forgot everything. Then it crashed back, the journals, the photographs, the impossible truth, and he had to press his face into the pillow to muffle the sound that tore from his throat. His mother had lied to him. About everything. About who she was, who his father was, what Kelvin was. Every bedtime story, every warning to stay hidden, every time she looked at him with sadness in her eyes, it had all been built on secrets. And now she was gone, and he couldn't even ask her why. A knock at the door. Kelvin didn't answer, but it opened anyway. Alaric entered, carrying a tray with food that smelled better than anything Kelvin had eaten in years. He set it on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the mattress, careful to keep distance between them. You didn't sleep, Alaric observed. Can't imagine why. Kelvin's voice came out harsher than intended. Alaric flinched but didn't retreat. I know this is overwhelming. I know you have no reason to trust me. But Kelvin, I want to protect you. Please let me. Protect me? Kelvin sat up, anger flaring hot in his chest. You didn't even know I existed until yesterday. You let Mom hide for 11 years. You let her die thinking she had to keep me away from you. Because I thought you were both dead. Alaric's composure cracked, pain bleeding through. Do you think I wouldn't have torn the world apart to find you if I'd known? Isabella left to protect you from my enemies, and she was right to do it. The moment the court learns what you are. What am I? Kelvin demanded. Everyone keeps calling me hybrid, damper, like I'm supposed to know what that means. I'm just a kid who lived on the streets and ate garbage, and now apparently I'm part vampire? How is that even possible? Alaric's expression softened. Come with me. Let me show you. They went to the training hall, a vast chamber deep in the castle with padded floors and walls reinforced with steel. Maya was already there with a vampire instructor, practicing forms that looked like deadly ballet. She waved enthusiastically when she saw them. Watch, Alaric said. He moved, and Kelvin's eyes couldn't track it. One moment Alaric stood beside him, the next he was across the room, then back again, the displacement of air the only evidence he'd moved at all. Vampire speed, Alaric explained. We're stronger, faster, more durable than humans. We heal from most injuries in minutes. And you have this in your blood too. I can't do that. Because it's dormant. Your human side suppresses it, keeps it buried. But it's there. Alaric gestured to a training dummy. Hit it. As hard as you can. Kelvin felt ridiculous, but he approached the dummy and threw a punch. His fist connected with solid thud, and pain exploded up his arm. Ow, that's just... The dummy's head tore clean off its post and flew across the room, slamming into the far wall with enough force to crack the stone. Kelvin stared at his fist. At the dummy. Back at his fist. What the... Your anger triggered it, Alaric said quietly. Strong emotions unlock your abilities. But without training, without control, you're dangerous. To yourself and others. For the next 6 hours, Kelvin learned what he was capable of. Speed that made the world blur. Strength that could bend steel. Healing that closed cuts in minutes instead of days. But Alaric was right, it was unstable. One moment Kelvin would be moving at human speed, the next he'd crash into a wall because his body had accelerated without warning. His enhanced strength would flare unpredictably, shattering training equipment he'd meant to simply grip. By midday, he was exhausted and frustrated and more confused than ever. This is impossible, he said, slumped against the wall. How am I supposed to control something I can't even feel until it happens? Time and practice. Alaric sat beside him, close but not touching. But we may not have that luxury. He pulled out a folder, old photographs, documents, maps. Your mother kept records. Contacts within the Hunters Guild, people she trusted. Most are dead or disappeared, but a few remain. If we can reach them, they might know who ordered the attack on Isabella. Who wants you found? Kelvin studied the papers. One name had been circled multiple times, Marcus Webb. A note in his mother's handwriting. If something happens to me, Marcus will help. He owes me everything. You want to use me as bait, Kelvin said flatly. I want to find who killed your mother. Alaric's voice was steel wrapped in ice. And I want to know why Councilwoman Seraphine has been meeting with known Hunter operatives in secret. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, you would be exposed. But you would be protected every moment. My best guards, surveillance, magical tracking. I'll do it. Alaric blinked. Kelvin, you should consider. I've been considering all day. Kelvin stood, his green eyes hard. Someone killed my mom. Someone's trying to use me for something. And apparently someone on your own council is working with Hunters. I want the truth. I want them to pay. So yeah, I'll be your bait. Maya appeared in the doorway, having finished her training. I'm coming too. Absolutely not, Alaric said immediately. She's my sister. Kelvin surprised himself by saying it. If I'm walking into danger, she should know where I am. Through the bond, Maya said, nodding. I'll feel if something's wrong. I can lead you to him faster than any tracker. Alaric looked between his children, one he'd just found, one he'd raised, and something in his expression crumbled. You're both so much braver than I deserve. 2 days later, Kelvin walked into a coffee shop in the heart of the city, wearing clothes that fit for the first time in years and carrying a phone with a tracking chip embedded in its case. He ordered something called a mocha, his first taste of chocolate in forever, and sat by the window. The man who approached looked ordinary. Mid-40s, graying hair, tired eyes. He sat across from Kelvin without asking permission. You look just like her, Marcus Webb said softly. Sarah, your mother. She was my partner before she disappeared. She didn't disappear. She was hiding. I know. And I know what you are. Marcus leaned forward. The guild wants the serum formula. The one Isabella encoded. They're willing to pay anything, offer protection, guarantee your safety. In exchange for what? The lullaby. That's all. Just sing it once, let us record it. Then you can disappear again, live whatever life you want. Kelvin studied him. Who hired you? I can't. Who? Hired. You. Something in Kelvin's voice must have triggered his abilities, because Marcus flinched back, his eyes widening. Councilwoman Seraphine, he whispered. She approached us 6 months ago. Said there was a hybrid heir, said we needed to find him before the king did. She's paying a fortune. He stopped. You're already with him. You're the bait. Yeah. Kelvin smiled, and it wasn't friendly. And you just confirmed everything we needed to know. The coffee shop doors burst open. Vampire guards poured in, moving too fast for human eyes to track. Marcus ran. He didn't make it 3 steps. The warehouse district reeked of rust and stagnant water, a perfect maze of abandoned buildings and broken dreams. Marcus had given up the meeting location within minutes of capture, the promise of mercy loosening his tongue faster than threats ever could. Now Kelvin crouched on a rooftop 3 blocks away, vampire guards positioned in the shadows around him, waiting for the signal. "This feels wrong," he whispered to the guard beside him, a woman named Lyra with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Traps usually do," she replied. "Stay behind us when it starts. Your father would have my head if." The explosion cut her off. Fire erupted from the target warehouse, a ball of orange and black that lit up the night sky. But it wasn't just fire. Kelvin's newly awakened senses caught something else in the smoke. Silver particles. Holy water vapor. Magic designed to burn vampire flesh. "It's a counter-trap," Lyra shouted. "Fall back. Fall back." Too late. Hunters poured from every building, every alley, every shadow. Dozens of them in tactical gear, armed with crossbows and blades that glowed with symbols Kelvin didn't recognize. They moved like they'd been waiting for this moment, like they'd planned every angle. The vampire guards engaged immediately, and the night erupted into chaos. Kelvin had never seen real combat before. Street fights, sure, quick and brutal and usually over in seconds. But this was war condensed into a city block. Vampires moved with impossible grace, becoming blurs of motion that tore through human defenses. But the hunters knew what they were fighting, had trained for it. Silver nets dropped from rooftops. Explosive bolts filled the air. One guard went down screaming as holy water ate through his armor. "Stay down." Lyra grabbed Kelvin, pulling him behind an air conditioning unit. "Don't." A hunter appeared behind her, blade raised. Kelvin didn't think. His body moved on instinct, on that unstable power that had been flickering in and out all week. He was suddenly between them, his hand catching the blade barehanded. It should have cut him to the bone. Instead, it shattered. The hunter's eyes went wide. Kelvin's grip tightened on his wrist, and he heard bones crack like dry twigs. The man screamed. And something inside Kelvin snapped. Power flooded through him, raw, uncontrolled, terrifying. The world sharpened into painful clarity. Every heartbeat, every breath, every drop of blood became a symphony of violence. His vampire side surged forward with no humanity to temper it, and suddenly everyone looked like prey. He moved. The first hunter went down with a crushed windpipe. The second flew 20 feet into a brick wall. The third. "Kelvin, stop." Lyra's voice cut through the haze, but his body had already committed. His hand was around her throat, lifting her off the ground, her face turning blue as she clawed at his grip. She wasn't a hunter. She was one of his father's guards. She was supposed to be protected. But in that moment, she was just another threat. "Stop." Alaric's power crashed over him like a tidal wave, forcing Kelvin to his knees. His hand released Lyra, and she collapsed gasping. The red haze lifted enough for Kelvin to see what he'd done, the bodies, the blood, the terror in the eyes of vampires who were supposed to be on his side. I couldn't." "Secure him," Alaric commanded, his voice cold with fury and fear. "And find out what they wanted." They zip-tied Kelvin's hands, plastic that his strength could have snapped easily if he'd tried, but he didn't try. He sat against the warehouse wall while vampire guards rounded up the surviving hunters, while medics tended to Lyra's crushed throat, while Alaric interrogated prisoners with a precision that made Kelvin's stomach turn. One hunter, young, maybe early 20s, bleeding from a dozen wounds, started laughing when Alaric demanded answers. "You're already too late," he wheezed. "Seraphine has the princess. Has her right now at the old cathedral. While you were chasing ghosts here, she was taking everything you love." The world stopped. Alaric's phone rang. He answered, listened for 3 seconds, and his face went absolutely white. "Maya's gone from the castle," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Her guards were found unconscious. Seraphine and 6 council members have disappeared." Kelvin felt the bond before anyone said anything, that connection he'd felt since finding Maya in the alley. It was still there, a golden thread in his mind, but it was screaming. Terror and confusion and a desperate cry for help. The cathedral, Kelvin gasped. She's scared. She's so scared. They moved as one, every vampire, every guard, racing back toward the castle to mobilize forces. But when they arrived, chaos had already taken root. Council members were split into factions, shouting at each other in the throne room. Half wanted to storm the cathedral. Half insisted it was a trap. All of them seemed to forget that a little girl was in danger. Enough. Alaric's power silenced them. I am still your king. We will. You're the king of nothing if Seraphine claims the throne by right of conquest, an older vampire interrupted. She has 6 council members with her, Alaric. 6 votes. She's challenging your rule. If you leave this castle, if you abandon your seat of power, she can claim you abdicated through cowardice. My daughter. Is one life weighed against the entire kingdom? The vampire's voice was cold. A king makes hard choices. Alaric looked torn in two, his ancient composure finally shattering completely. Kelvin saw it in his face, the impossible choice between the daughter he'd raised and the kingdom he'd ruled for centuries. Both were his responsibility. Both were his burden. No. Kelvin stood, ripping through the zip ties with strength he didn't know he had. You don't get to choose. Kelvin. I'll get Maya. His voice was steady despite the fear coursing through him. You stay here, hold the throne, keep Seraphine from winning by default. I'll bring my sister home. You can't go alone. Your powers are unstable. You nearly killed one of my guards. Then I'll take Lyra and whoever else can move fast. Kelvin met his father's eyes. You told me Maya could feel me, that our bond was real. She's calling for me right now. Not you. Me. Because I'm her brother, and I'm the one who found her the first time. Alaric looked like he might argue, might pull rank, might lock Kelvin in the tower rather than let him walk into danger. Instead, he pulled a ring from his finger, silver with a crimson stone, and pressed it into Kelvin's palm. The royal seal, he said quietly. Any vampire who sees this must obey your commands as if they came from me. Bring her home, son. Bring my daughter home. Kelvin closed his fist around the ring. Count on it. The cathedral loomed against the night sky like a monument to forgotten gods, its spires clawing at clouds that threatened rain. Kelvin approached from the east, moving through shadows with a grace that was becoming more natural every hour. Lyra and 3 other guards followed at a distance, close enough to help, far enough to let him work. Because Kelvin had realized something in the frantic planning session, his hybrid nature made him invisible in a way no pure vampire could be. When vampires extended their senses, searching for threats, they felt for human heartbeats and warm blood. Kelvin registered as vampire cold, still other. When hunters used their detection spells and blessed wards, they sought undead corruption and dark magic. Kelvin's human half deflected those, made him read as mortal. To both sides, he was a ghost. A nothing. The perfect infiltrator. He slipped through a broken window on the cathedral's north side, landing in what had once been a chapel. Dust and debris covered everything. Moonlight streamed through shattered, stained glass, painting the floor in broken colors. He could hear them below, heartbeats, footsteps, the low murmur of voices planning treason. Following the bond was easy. Maya's fear sang through his blood like a distress beacon, pulling him down through the cathedral's guts, past rooms that stank of mold and rot, until he reached a door reinforced with new steel and warded with symbols that made his skin crawl. He tested the handle. Locked, obviously. But the door was old wood beneath the steel plating, and his strength was getting easier to control with every passing hour. One hard yank, and the lock tore free with a shriek of metal. Maya sat in the center of the room, silver chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles. Where they touched her skin, angry red burns marked her pale flesh. She looked up as Kelvin entered, and relief flooded her face so completely he thought she might cry. You came, she whispered. I knew you would, but I was scared, and they said. Shoo. Kelvin knelt beside her, examining the chains. Silver burned vampires on contact. His hands were already smoking where he gripped the links, pain shooting up his arms, but his human half let him tolerate it for crucial seconds. He pulled, muscles straining, and the chain snapped. Maya gasped as the silver fell away, revealing burns that would take days to heal even with vampire regeneration. Can you walk? I think so. They gave me something. Made me weak. I'll carry you. He lifted her easily. She weighed almost nothing and turned toward the door. Seraphine stood there, blocking the exit, 6 other vampires flanking her. All wore expressions of cold satisfaction. The hybrid arrives, she said, her ice blue eyes glittering. How predictable. How touching. And how perfectly it serves our needs. Get out of my way. Or what? You'll lose control again? Kill more allies? You're a weapon you can't even aim, boy. That's why abominations like you are forbidden. She gestured, and the vampires moved forward. Take them both. Alive. They'll make excellent bargaining chips. Kelvin ran. Not toward them, toward the window behind him. His enhanced speed kicked in naturally now, born of desperation and need. He crashed through old glass and into open air, Maya clutched tight against his chest. For one terrifying moment they fell, 3 stories of empty space rushing past. Then Lyra was there, catching them midair with vampire speed, redirecting their momentum into a controlled landing in the courtyard below. The castle, Kelvin gasped. They're moving on the castle. They ran through streets that blurred into streaks of light and shadow. Behind them, Kelvin heard the sounds of pursuit, Seraphine and her traitors giving chase. But ahead, the castle grew closer, its towers burning with emergency beacons that meant the attack had already begun. They burst through the gates into pandemonium. The throne room had become a battlefield. Seraphine's rogue vampires clashed with Alaric's loyal guards in a violent dance that tore tapestries from walls and shattered ancient furniture. Hunters moved between them, those who'd allied with the traitors, using blessed weapons to even the odds. In the center of it all, Alaric fought with the terrible grace of a king pushed too far, his power making the very air tremble. Enough. Seraphine's voice cut through the chaos. She stood on the dais beside the throne, Maya's stolen crown in her hands. King Alaric, you will abdicate, or I will kill your precious daughter right here. Maya's not, someone started to say. Then Kelvin crashed through the skylight. Glass rained down like diamonds as he landed in the center of the throne room, Maya still in his arms. He set her down carefully, putting himself between her and Seraphine, and felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Maya. Alaric's relief was palpable. You're too late, Seraphine snarled. The challenge stands. I have 6 council votes. I have an army. And I have this. She produced a vial from her robes, crimson liquid that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Pure crimson serum. Undiluted. Enough to kill any vampire in seconds, even pure-blood royalty. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? Her smile was terrible. Your line ends tonight, Alaric. Both your children dead. Then the throne passes to the council, and the council belongs to me. She moved with vampire speed, crossing the throne room in a blur, the vial raised. Kelvin was faster. He didn't think about what he was doing, didn't consider the consequences. He just moved, putting himself between Seraphine and Maya, and felt the serum splash across his face and neck, burning like acid. The throne room went silent. You fool, Seraphine breathed. That dose would kill 10 vampires. For a hybrid, it will be agony. Kelvin waited for the pain, for the poison to eat through him. It didn't come. Instead, warmth spread from where the serum touched his skin. Not burning, transforming. He felt his blood respond, felt it recognize the formula encoded in his mother's lullaby, felt his hybrid nature do something impossible. His veins began to glow beneath his skin, crimson light spreading from his heart to his extremities. The serum wasn't killing him. It was activating him. Impossible, Seraphine whispered. Kelvin looked at his hands, at the light pulsing beneath his skin, and understood with sudden clarity what his mother had created. Not just a formula to heal hybrids. A formula to make them whole. Maya, he said calmly. Come here. His sister approached, confusion in her eyes. Kelvin took her burned wrists in his hands, and where his skin touched hers, the light spread. The silver burns healed in seconds, her strength returning as his transformed, awakened blood neutralized the poison in her system. He's an antidote, Alaric said with wonder. His blood can cure crimson serum poisoning. Then kill him. Seraphine screamed at her allies. Kill him before. But Alaric was already moving, and the loyal guards with him, and the battle was joined in earnest. Kelvin pulled Maya behind the throne as violence erupted around them, his body still glowing with that strange light, his mind reeling with the implications. His mother hadn't just hidden him. She'd created him to be the cure for the very weapon that had threatened his existence. The tower room had become familiar in ways Kelvin never expected. He knew which floorboards creaked, where the morning light hit first, how the wind sounded different depending on which window was open. A week ago, he'd been terrified to touch anything. Now he sat propped against the headboard with books scattered across the blankets, studying vampire history like it was homework he'd actually chosen to do. Maya was curled up at the foot of the bed, her platinum hair still damp from a bath, working on a drawing with intense concentration. She'd barely left his side since the throne room battle. Neither of them talked about it much, the fear, the violence, how close they'd come to losing everything. But sometimes she'd reach out and touch his hand, just to make sure he was real, and Kelvin understood completely. He did the same thing. You're drawing the cathedral, he observed, watching her sketch the Gothic spires. I want to remember it different, she said without looking up. Not scary. Just a place where my brother saved me. Brother. The words still felt strange and right at the same time. The door opened without knocking, only one person had that privilege. Alaric entered carrying a wooden box inlaid with silver, his expression serious in a way that made Kelvin's stomach tighten. We need to talk, Alaric said, settling into the chair beside the bed. About your future. That sounds ominous. It's a choice. One I should have offered you immediately, but... He paused, choosing words carefully. I was selfish. I'd just found my son. I didn't want to lose you again. Maya's pencil stopped moving. There's a ritual, Alaric continued. Old magic, very powerful. It can suppress your vampire nature completely, lock it away where it can never surface. You'd live as fully human, with no memory of any of this. The castle, the court, Maya and me, it would all fade like a dream. You could return to the human world, be adopted by a good family, live a normal life. The words hung in the air like a blade. You're offering to erase me, Kelvin said slowly. I'm offering you freedom. Alaric's crimson eyes were shadowed with pain. You didn't choose this life. It was thrust upon you by circumstance and bloodline. You deserve the chance to be just. Kelvin. A boy who gets to be normal. I was normal, Kelvin said. For 2 years, I was so normal I slept in alleys and ate from dumpsters and watched people walk past me like I was invisible. That's what normal got me. He swung his legs off the bed, standing to face his father properly. I spent 2 years surviving, he said. Just making it to the next day, the next meal, the next safe place to sleep. I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live. And I can't do that by pretending half of what I am doesn't exist. The court will never fully accept you, Alaric warned. Seraphine's faction is defeated, but prejudice runs deep. You'll face suspicion, hostility, danger. So, Tuesday. Kelvin smiled slightly. Dad, I've been in danger since Mom died. At least here, I'm in danger with family. Alaric's composure cracked. He stood and pulled Kelvin into an embrace that smelled like old books and rain, and Kelvin felt something in his chest unlock, a knot of fear and loneliness that had been tied there since he was 8 years old. Then we do this properly, Alaric said when they separated. Today. The ceremony was held at sunset, when both vampires and humans could comfortably attend. The throne room had been restored, the battle damage erased by teams of servants who worked with supernatural efficiency. Council members lined the walls, some looking pleased, others barely concealing their disgust. Kelvin wore formal clothes that actually fit, his hair trimmed and styled, looking like someone who belonged in a castle instead of an alley. Maya stood beside him in a gown of deep crimson, holding his hand tight enough to hurt. Alaric rose from his throne, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. "I call this court to witness," he declared. "For 11 years, I mourned a son I believed lost. I raised one daughter and thought my line would end with her. But the past has returned to us, brought by fate and a mother's sacrifice." He descended from the dais, stopping before Kelvin. "Kelvin Valtori, born of Isabella Blackwood and Alaric Valtori, I acknowledge you before this court as my son and heir. You are blood of my blood, bone of my bone, and no prejudice or ancient law will deny you your birthright." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. One council member, an ancient vampire with silver hair, stepped forward. "The boy is damper," he said, not unkindly. "Unprecedented as an heir. The court must understand what this means." "It means," Alaric said, his power making the chandeliers tremble, "that my son carries within him the cure to the greatest weapon ever forged against our kind. Examine the evidence." He gestured, and scholars brought forward Isabella's journals, the formula decoded, chemical analyses that made Kelvin's head hurt. But the conclusion was clear. The lullaby wasn't instructions for making crimson serum. It was the antidote. Isabella Blackwood discovered the serum's fatal flaw, one scholar explained. She created a counteragent and encoded it so deeply that only someone with both vampire and human blood could activate it. She made herself a target, died protecting the secret, knowing one day her son would be the bridge between two worlds. Kelvin felt tears sting his eyes. All those nights she'd sung to him, rocking him to sleep even when they had nothing else. She'd been programming his very blood to be salvation. Every note, every repetition, every gentle word had been building toward this moment. "Your mother saved us all," Alaric said softly, for Kelvin's ears alone. "She saw what I was too blind to see, that the war between our kinds would destroy both. She created you to be the peace we couldn't make ourselves." He placed a circlet on Kelvin's head, simple silver worked with crimson stones. Not as elaborate as Maya's crown, but unmistakably royal. "Welcome home, my son." The court erupted, some in applause, others in outrage, all in shock. But Kelvin barely heard them. He was looking at Maya, who was crying and smiling at the same time, and at Alaric, who looked at him like he was something precious instead of something disposable. Later, after the ceremony dissolved into complicated political discussions Kelvin didn't understand yet, the three of them stood on the balcony overlooking the mountains. Dawn was coming. Alaric would need to retreat inside soon, but for now, they watched the sky lighten from black to deep blue to the first hints of gold. "Does it hurt?" Kelvin asked. "The sunlight." "Like fire," Alaric admitted. "But I wanted to see this. Your first sunrise as my acknowledged son." Maya yawned against Kelvin's side. "Are you scared?" she asked. "About being a prince?" "Terrified," Kelvin said honestly. "But I've been scared before. This time, I'm not alone." The sun broke over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. Alaric squeezed Kelvin's shoulder once, then retreated into shadow, leaving the siblings to watch the day arrive. For the first time since he was 8 years old, Kelvin wasn't alone. He had a father who'd torn the world apart looking for him, a sister who could feel his heart across miles, a purpose beyond simple survival. He was a hybrid prince who shouldn't exist, the bridge between two worlds that had been at war for centuries, the living cure to a poison that had claimed countless lives. His story was just beginning. But for now, in this moment, standing in the sunrise with his sister's hand in his, Kelvin let himself simply be a boy who'd finally found his way home.